Welcome to Palestine Files. I'm Wissam Bahrani. Israel has identified 7 natural reserves, at least 7, in the occupied West Bank, with the aim of seizing and holding onto them. On this episode, we're going to focus on what's being described as a silent annexation. These natural reserves are in the Jordan Valley, but mostly in Area C of the occupied West Bank. So we're also focusing on that as well. This so-called Area C is rich with vital natural reserves. This is where the wealth is, the money that can help Palestine's economy to thrive. This, of course, all comes in the midst of Trump's so-called deal of the century, which allows Tel Aviv to seize more Palestinian land. Land. The ministry also says the measure is for the benefit of shoring up settlements in the occupied West Bank. Under the Oslo Accords, Area C of the occupied West Bank should have been transferred to the Palestinians in full by 1997. It makes up 60% of the occupied West Bank. So, as you could imagine, Israel, being Israel, has instead expanded its military occupation there, has expanded its settlement activities there. Today, the majority of Israeli settlers squat in Area C. The United Nations, of course, considers all Israeli settlements illegal. They are illegal under international law. Essentially, Tel Aviv wants to annex all of Area C, and thanks to the so-called deal of the century, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly stated that Israel has begun to draw up maps of land in the occupied West Bank that will be annexed in accordance with Trump's initiative. Lots of comments on this on social media. Let's just check out a few and start with Donald Pelez. He says, "Who knew this when, as children, we contributed our coins to plant trees in Israel?" Reference there to US taxpayers' money that's being sent to Israel to the tune of, I believe, at least $3 billion a year. And Peter Shijevin says, "And to destroy all memory of the Palestinian villages. Replying to Donald there. Let's move to Jackway Bradley. She says, despicable act. We have sat back and allowed Hitler to invade and take over Europe. Then, question, watched the persecution and displacement of the Jewish people. Another question, two wrongs don't make a right. Free Palestine. Fair, valid comment there. Moving on to Baz Khan, he says, or she, they are disgusting, just like the politicians and media here who cover for Israel's crimes. Fair enough. Shafted by Gammon, he must like his fish. How long before Israel is called out on its land stealing? Good question. We don't know. Who knows? Let's move on to it will never be called out. The UN and all Western countries are scared of upsetting Israel, I'm afraid. Responding to Shah by the Gammon, Miss Gammon or Mr. Gammon, who knows? We all like a bit of gammon, but it's a valid point. The United States is often always accused of using its veto power at the UN Security Council to side with Israel and allow it to get away with its war crimes. I believe, do we have one more? No? Yes, we do. Zina Al-Tahan, she says, Israel to build more natural reserves for settlers in occupied West Bank. That equals more theft of Palestinian land, demolition of Palestinian homes, eviction and displacement of Palestinian families, more trees uprooted, Palestinian farmers crippled. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the reaction to this story by social media users. Now, it has also made headlines around the world. Let's see what those reports said. It's a packed show, so without further delay, let's bring in our first guest. Huwaida Araf is a Palestinian-American activist, lawyer and co-founder of the International Solidarity Movement. Ms. Araf, welcome to Palestine Files. Would you call the latest Israeli occupation of at least seven Palestinian natural reserves as a silent annexation?
Well, I don't know if I would actually call it silent, because Israeli leaders vying for domestic political support are actually declaring it publicly. They are proud and run on what they do, which is continuing to annex Palestinian land in an attempt to get Palestinians in smaller and smaller areas with the ultimate hope that Palestinians will leave. And that is the larger Israeli strategy, is to get as much Palestinian land as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible. So it is annexation. It's even more sinister than that. It's ethnic cleansing. And if we look at the area that you just mentioned in terms of the nature reserves, this is over 5,000 hectares, over 13,000 acres of land, and some 40% of it is under private Palestinian ownership. Now, under Israeli laws regulating nature reserves, Palestinians will be forbidden to cultivate their own land. And this is very fertile land. So what you'll have is Palestinians, if they attempt to stay or try to stay on their land, it'll be very difficult for them to live. So Israel puts them in this bind. It's not coming and hauling them away in big bus addresses, but it is making it more and more difficult for them to stay. So it's an annexation, it's an ethnic cleansing, and not silent because Israel is declaring it.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. Now, of course, this happened before the announcement of the so-called deal of the century. How does this pro-Israel initiative further add to the misery of the Palestinians?
Well, we must understand that Palestinians, the situation that they're living in now misery is very mild. It is becoming very difficult, if not impossible, to survive in some areas of the occupied territories, including Gaza, which is now virtually unlivable. But what is important to understand is it was never expected or intended that Palestinians would accept the terms of this deal. Palestinians, in fact, call it the steal of the century, among other things. It was drafted by the colonial occupier, and it just gives scraps of land to the indigenous Palestinian people and then tried to call it peace. It's a plan for permanent subjugation of the Palestinian people, and it gives Israel a chance to say, and we've heard it from the Israelis already and from Jared Kushner, is that Palestinians again are refusing to make peace. Palestinians are always saying no, but Israel doesn't want Palestinians to accept because the status quo benefits Israel. It allows Israel to continue to annex Palestinian land under this guise that, they don't have a partner, and so they continue to steal, and the international community does nothing about it. And Israel can come say, we tried to make peace, and they continue to do what they have been doing for decades.
Right, and following the so-called deal of the century, we saw strong unity among Palestinians in their rejection of the plan. Will Palestinian officials in the West Bank and the besieged Gaza Strip unite for perhaps a common cause, a common goal?
Well, as a Palestinian, I definitely would like to see that. We are stronger together for sure. And over the years, there have been attempts to form unity governments, to put the political differences aside and unite. And what happens when Palestinians do that is pressure is put on the Palestinian Authority through threatening sanctions, cutting off aid, because Israel doesn't want Palestinians to unite. And that is frustrating for the Palestinian people who, as I mentioned, for years have been calling for political unity. So will they? There are talks about it now. Will it succeed and will it hold? I can't tell you. I can tell you that Palestinians will be put under tremendous pressure if this unity does hold, in an attempt by Israel and supporters of Israel to break it, again, to keep the Palestinians disunited and to keep Israel's plan to colonize all of Palestine moving. And I can also tell you that the Palestinian people not only have been calling for unity, but do want to see new leadership.
All right. Okay, Ms. Araf, thank you very much. I'm afraid time has gotten the better of us. We're going to take a very short break and be right back with the rest of the show, so don't go anywhere. Israel's announcement comes in the midst of Trump's deal of the century, which has escalated already heightened tensions in the occupied territories. After the White House released the plan, a Palestinian injured at least 14 Israelis, including 12 Israeli soldiers in occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds. The Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, described the attack as a new stage in the revolution against the Israeli occupation. Meanwhile, clashes broke out across the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces killed a number of Palestinians, including one who was protesting the demolition of a Palestinian home by Israeli forces. In one incident, Israeli forces also opened live fire at Palestinians in the West Bank city of Jenin, which killed a bystander who happened to be a Palestinian policeman. Dr. Nabil Shaith is a veteran Palestinian politician. He is currently the special advisor and special envoy to the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. We sat down with him to get his perspective on more Israeli land grabbing. Take a look.
They start by dividing the land into A, B, C, and the C area, which they keep full control, is then divided into natural closed areas and other areas designed for colonial settlements, and third areas that are considered to be security areas for the protection of the security of the Israeli colonial settlements. All of this has one objective: to take over the land without the people, to get rid of the Palestinian people and to take over their land. Now, this started from the very beginning of the occupation in 1948 and then the occupation of 1967. But today there is full coordination between the United States government and the Israeli government. And the so-called deal of the century was actually written by the Israelis. And in fact, it was presented to us by the Israelis in 2010 and 2011, and we rejected them totally. And now they come through the President of the United States, as if it was an American suggestion to make peace. There was absolutely nothing in that project that will give the Palestinians anything. It will simply coordinate with the Israeli Zionist plan to take over the land and get rid of the people. Well, there are always three objectives, of taking over the land. First, of course, is to take the land and get rid of the Palestinian people in order to continue to deepen the Israeli takeover of our land. Then, secondly, there are the locations that have some security aspects, high areas, low areas, defend under that land. So if there is an area where there is underground water, that will be then the primary concern. And then they will look for the other concern of the population expansion and the strategic locations. We are fighting not only for survival, but to regain all our land. We have not given up our land because there is an Israeli settler colonial occupation. Our people have been struggling all along. Out of that struggle, we were able to create a Palestinian Authority in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. But the struggle will continue to get back that land.
It's now time to bring in our second and final guest of the show. Jafar Ramini is a Palestinian writer and political activist. Mr. Ramini, welcome. Is Israel trying to annex land or resources, or both?
It's all of the above. They steal the land that they know all the water resources are in, and the fertile land that can be used for agricultural reasons. People must remember that the Palestinian nation are farmers, and they live from the yield of the land. And when the Israeli government encourages the settlers to confiscate the fertile land of Area C and the Jordan Valley, this is the basket of Palestine. It's all taken. How are the Palestinians to live? The deal is one-sided and totally biased, and it is unfair and illegal. And the Palestinians will not stand for it.
Now, as Israel continues to grab more Palestinian land, especially in Area C, as you mentioned, can Palestinians resist any forceful evacuation of their lands?
The Palestinians have been resisting the occupation and the confiscation of their land since 1917. It's over 100 years. They will continue to resist. The price will be very high because you're talking about the fifth most powerful army in the world against the indigenous people who are unarmed and unprotected.
Right, and I have to ask, on the backdrop of the so-called deal of the century, will Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip unite and perhaps form a unity government?
This is the hope of all of us true Palestinians who want to see our country liberated and our people united. Whether Hamas or Fatah will unite is still to be seen. Mr. Abbas called for it when he was in Cairo last weekend, and Mr. Haniya responded of the Hamas. And the other factions in Gaza and the West Bank said to Mr. Abbas, we will stand behind you. But whether Mr. Abbas will do what he promised to do is still to remain to be seen. We must all remember that he did it 3 times before and never acted on it. Words now has to be turned into deeds and firm stand against this absolutely inhumane deal.
Jafar Amini, Palestinian writer and political analyst, thank you very much for that analysis. Now, we spoke to Palestinians on the ground in the occupied territories. Let's hear what they had to say.
أنا عشان نتصدى لهيك مؤامرات ولهيك تقسيمات لازم إحنا نتوحد ونكون شعب واحد ونقاوم هذا الاحتلال معا وسويا. غير هيك ما حدا يقنعني إنه إحنا منقسمين، بدنا ننتصر وبدنا نقاوم وبدنا نبني دولة وإحنا منقسمين.
الشيء طبيعي هذا، لأن أول ما قالوا هاي الدولة اليهودية من أولها يعني، وبعدين ناويين على كل شيء، ناويين على التهجير وناويين على ضم الدولة اليهودية وناويين على كل شيء. طبعا هم اللي حطوا الخريطة وهم اللي أقروا شو بده يصير في مستقبلنا، بس هاي بلدنا والقدس عاصمتنا والأقصى حبيبنا وإحنا اللي راح نحررها.
الشعب الفلسطيني راح يقف وقفة واحدة ضد هذا الإجراء، وسوف يكون بكافة السبل السلمية أو غير السلمية لمنع هذه الصفقة أن تتم. وكذلك بالنسبة لترامب، يعني أنا أعجب بأن شخص يقرر مصير شعب كامل ودولة كاملة على أي أساس. هذا إن دل على شيء يدل على ضعف الدول العربية، ولكن نحن بقيادتنا الفلسطينية سوف نقف ضد هذه الصفقة.
كل هاي الصفقة خلقت يعني ميتة ما فيها روح للحياة.
المشروع الصهيوني في فلسطين منذ وعد بلفور وحتى الآن ماشي بمخطط على وتيرة متكاملة ومخطط مرسوم وماشي. مجرد كل 20 سنة بسووا لنا قصة بدنا نعمل مفاوضات في سلام، تفضلوا تعالوا. دخلت منظمة التحرير في 94 الضفة وغزة وحدود 67. قعدنا 20 سنة 25 سنة السلطة الوطنية، في الآخر قالوا يا عمي احنا بدنا نعترف بالواقع، وصفقة ترامب بيجي بدها تعترف بالواقع. ما هي اسمها أصلا صفقة، هي مش معاهدة سلام، معاهدة سلام بين دولتين، صفقة يعني مفروضة من طرف على طرف، من طرف قوي على طرف ضعيف. هذه الصفقة لا تلبي الحد الأدنى من الحقوق الفلسطينية.
So, Israel is annexing more Palestinian land, with it taking Palestinian natural reserves. The Israeli Minister of War publicly stated that Tel Aviv is embarking on a mission to seize Area C of the West Bank, 60% of the West Bank, that is. Again, this all comes in the midst of Trump's so-called deal of the century, which just happened to be unveiled before Israel holds another election. Another present from the US President Donald Trump to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to boost the latter's chances at the election. But the unity shown in the aftermath of the deal of the century, if this unity is put into practical action, it may just thwart Tel Aviv and Washington's project. From me and the whole team, thank you for watching Palestine Files, and make sure not to miss our next show next week.